Yeah, welcome. My name is Michael Haas. I lead a team of investor agents called House Hack Seattle that puts on this event every month for the last 5 years, believe it or not. So a lot of us in real estate have a investor or an owner or a buyer or a seller mindset. Not a lot of us come to the business from the contractor side of things. And it's interesting, when you're coming through a certain lens, like the investor lens or the buyer lens, you want certain things from your contractor or your agent or your lender, and it can be frustrating if you don't get those things. And the reality is that there's a whole nother side of the coin. Your agent, your lender, your contractor is dealing with their own problems, and it may be a completely different frustration directed towards you. So I think one of the amazing opportunities of events like this is we can get, rather than all complaining about contractor experiences that we've had, we can get real contractors, we can get real architects, we can get the people to part the curtain and show us the way to work together with our team for mutual success, right? The type of businesses that thrive in this real estate market are businesses that are built on trust and skill with contractors, agents, lenders, wholesalers, builders, developers, everyone working together and trusting each other and covering each other's back. And that type of relationship doesn't happen by accident. That type of relationship happens by your partners understanding what you need out of the relationship and you understanding what your partners need out of the relationship and continuing to provide for those needs so that you get these win-win situations. So I'm pumped. We've got a contractor that I've worked with personally speaking today, and someone that I think can really shed some light on the contractor side of the equation. He works with investors, including big flippers and rental property investors. He has some of his own properties. He's done some new development DADU builds, and is just really a wealth of knowledge in this space. I'm excited to hear from Luis about what he sees on his side of the equation working with investors, about ways that he thinks that investors can work with him better so that we can all be successful. So without further ado, please welcome up Luis.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. This is a very exciting opportunity to share some stories about construction. My name again is Luis Saga. I'm a general contractor. I'm going to present to you a story about construction that I think will relate a lot to what you guys do. Or what we all do anyway. I will give you a little bit of a background about myself, and I think my story might relate to some people that are working in the high-tech industry, and then I will tell you the story that it's basically an overview of construction in relation to real estate investment. So, and then I'll tell you a little bit about my company, and then at the end of the story, we'll have a little time for questions that I'd be happy to answer as much as I can. Okay? So, I'm going to start with, I'm sorry, I just do this. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from Mexico City. I came here in 1991, about 35 years ago. And just as some of you guys working in high tech, I was lucky and fortunate. 35 years ago, the story in real estate was significantly different to what it is right now. And so I was also, I always had this passion for architecture and design. And I decided to diversify my investments into real estate as well, just like many of you are doing right now. So I started acquiring properties that had the potential to turn them into duplex. Back in time, also the regulations were different to what we have right now. The access to properties, the cost and everything was so much different than what we have right now. So I'm being from Mexico, I was able to connect with several contractors. As you might know, 80% of the population in construction nationwide are from the Hispanic community. And so it was rather easy for me to connect with Hispanic contractors who helped me to start learning and be aware about the processes that are so important and critical in the process of real estate investment. So I work I was in the biotech industry, while I was doing all of this, I started delegating and understanding the process of delegation and the actually understanding of construction. So the biotech industry started taking a shift. A lot of the small biotechs were acquired by big pharma. And then it was quite challenging to navigate the industry later on. About 2013, I decided to make a change and I became a general contractor. I had the confidence that I was going to be able to conduct this kind of operation with all the experience that I gained during my investment times. And so I started two special projects. Special projects because I was engaging in different type of projects that were not necessarily the mainstream of residential construction. So I was, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with the Docker facility that is in Mercer Avenue, the Dog Lounge in South Lake Union. Luis Vicentini is the owner. I was part of the construction team to develop that facility, and I also remodeled all the facilities of Luis Vicentini. I remodeled the Sorrento Hotel. So anyway, I had an array of different projects that I started engaging, and that's why I decided to call the company Special Projects. Anyway, I continue working. Over the last 15 years, I've been engaging in multiple type of projects from residential, commercial, multifamily, investors. I myself was I've been an investor too, collaborating with different type of investors that do different type of engaging in real estate developments. So that's basically a summary of how I end up becoming a general contractor. I want to tell you basically an overview of the construction perspective that I think will be in some aspects very valuable to particularly young investors. But I also want to stress 4 particular points. I'm going to give you an overview of the different aspects of what you do in construction for investment properties. I will stress the importance of developing systems for implement construction projects in investment properties. I will also talk to you about the importance and some strategies and some considerations that you need to have in mind for when you look for a contractor. That will be, I believe, very valuable for you to develop your strategies for recruiting, partnering, and all of the things that are important to do in this kind of processes. And ultimately, the importance of partnership. Just like Michael said, I think that collaboration is a very powerful element in this kind of business. Ultimately, I believe that partnership, it helps in any kind of business. And I think that it's much easier and much substantially successful to collaborate with multiple people who has different knowledge and different skill sets that allows to have a much successful outcome in any endeavor that you do. Anyway, we'll start with this diagram. And by the way, I don't want you to stress too much about taking notes. I believe Michael will have this presentation available. And this is, there will be some diagrams that are too busy, but I just wanted to use this as a guidelines to stress the importance of the construction professionals in the processes of real estate development. So in this case, this is a diagram that shows a flow chart of what would happen if you would do new construction, right? And I believe deeply that, and I will tell you down the road some of the strategies that I think will be helpful and useful for investors to partner with contractors to maximize and optimize budgets. But here, what I wanted to stress is the importance of the presence of a professional construction person in every step of the way. You need to do the evaluation at the beginning, to do the vision. Oftentimes, if you think investors, especially People who start with investment don't have enough time, don't have enough knowledge. And it's so important that the perspective of a construction person will give you the empowerment, the wisdom, and assure you the ability to come up with a vision that is realistic, and that is, especially in a challenging world that we're having right now in real estate in Seattle, that is so competitive and so hard to navigate. So it's important that when you have to make decisions, especially when you start doing your due diligence, and then you start trying to figure out strategies to whether you decide to acquire or not a certain property, you have always the perspective of a construction person next to you. And then you can see the importance not only in the evaluation, but also in the preliminary assessment for cost engineering. It's so important to do evaluate aspects that the architect or other professionals might not see, but the construction person will. And so in the preliminary phase of assessment to determine whether you want to acquire or not a property, it's important to have that perspective. The cost engineering, once you decide to get it and once you decide to start crunching the numbers while the architect is doing the development of the project, it's also very important to have that person working with you to develop a cost engineering to really considering how tight is the budgets typically for investments, to optimize and to generate strategies that optimize the cost for any investment property. And ultimately, the actual execution of the construction and the management of all the costs of the process of the construction. So very important to have that person with you. This is, I believe, more the typical kind of investment that investors, particularly young investors, do, which is basically renovate properties that you can either turn them into rental properties or you can flip them, right? So, but yet, I had being hired to be a consultant for investors too, that they just need a little bit of information about determining what is the actual cost of renovating a house. There are so many aspects of a house when you're looking at a house and you have to make a decision so quickly that you need to know whether the installation of the electric, especially houses that are 100 years old, which is typically the case that investment comes in, whether the installation of the electrical is too old and needs to be replaced, or the pipes are galvanized pipes and then you have to replace everything, the foundation is cracked, what is going to be the impact in your refurbishing process, the side sewer, which is another very, very high ticket item. All of those things, it will be so much worth it to pay a few $100s to have a construction professional consulting with you and guiding you and giving you a perspective that will be so valuable for you to make a decision. Oftentimes, you have to make decisions in those kind of opportunities in days. And if you don't have the right budget, and the numbers don't crunch enough because you didn't have the right guidance, the right information, you're going to stuck in a negative number situation, so that's what you want to prevent. So again, you really need to partner with someone who has experience in construction, you can feel that you can trust, that you can communicate, and that's something that I strongly recommend to develop. Just like Michael was saying, you create a team of people, and you need to have, just like you have a real estate agent with you, helping you and guiding you to discover places. You need somebody on your back pocket telling you and being available as a consultant for you. Even if you end up with multiple type of people, the person that is your consultant not necessarily has to be your carpenter or your electrician, or you need to have a multiple people helping you in all of these process of cost engineering also in this particular investments are so critical and so important, even when you had already acquired the property, and how do you maximize the use of your budgets to refurbish the property that you want to do, whether you flip it or make an investment property. This is a very interesting slide because there is a lot of stigma about the differences of cost for general contractors. They call them the cheap contractors and the expensive contractors. But I want to tell you a little bit of a description of the importance of a really well-equipped general contractor. So in the slide you see, the guy on the left is someone who has developed systems. Systems in any business you do are so important. You need to know every step of the way in your organization to make sure that you can deliver predictable outcomes. So you need a contractor that understands the concept of systems, that has a system, that has an effective team that is comprised of very quality employees and subcontractors that are very skilled people, that are very responsible. There are so many qualifications that you have to have in your team to be able to be successful. Quoting systems are actually complex. It's important that within the systems of these individuals, you really need to know to develop precise quotes, transparent quotes as much as possible, because ultimately, even if you, one of the things, it's just as bad as overcharging a project as underbidding a project. Ultimately, either of the two situations will hit the client. So it's so important that you have systems that allows you to quote precisely your projects. You have to have many qualifications when you're a general contractor. It's so important that your networks, the collaborations that you have with your subcontractors and your employees are really strong, and you have a strong leadership capacity, because ultimately, if you think of a general contractor as like an orchestra director, you need to have a very good cello, you need to have a very good violinist, a very good pianist, so then you can have a really good symphony. If you don't have those teams and you don't have the capacity to lead the people right, if you don't treat your people right, if you don't pay them on time, if you don't pay them right, you don't have that loyalty that you require to be able to deliver good products to your clients. So that is very important, that you have a good network of people that is supporting you and that are responsible, reliable, and that you can account on them. Scheduling is so important. If you don't have a way to develop a precise schedule, and it doesn't need to be that everything needs to be, but you have to have the experience that when you develop a schedule, it's a schedule that is realistic and that is reflective of what you're going to have in every particular project that you're working. Every project is different. Construction is one of the most risky businesses. There are so many unforeseeable things that even people who had a lot of experience struggle with all of these surprises that you get when you engage in construction. And so scheduling is very important. Managing the budgets, it's just as important as a part of your system, to make sure that you're going to have everything on time, that you're going to have materials, that you're going to have inspections, that you're going to have everything. So you can see all the aspects of system for a general contractor to be able to support accordingly to all your clients. Now, the other side of the other type of contractor, which I want to explain you a situation. If you think the 80% of the population working in construction are coming from other countries, which unfortunately oftentimes most of these contractors are people who had developed, they're very good skilled construction workers, and they become so confident that they become sufficiently confident to become GCs. The problem though is that when you become a GC, you really need to have some minimal level of education. You need to have some understanding of administration, you need to know accounting, you need to know so many aspects, you need to know implementation of systems, you need to have a very savvy knowledge about computer usage. Everything here is electronic, and then in order to be able to fly and to deliver the systems that you need to do to your clients, you need to have these commands of information and skills. Leadership is also that sometimes in construction people lack on it. They don't know how to talk to people. They don't know. They just don't have that equipment. So when you're meeting a guy that don't have all of that, and of course doesn't have doesn't need to spend the money in creating a systems like this, because just think about how much it costs to have a system like this. How much it's going to cost you to have somebody in the office managing schedules, managing subcontractors, managing materials, managing everything from the office. And then people on the field managing all the projects. An average of a small and medium general contractor is about 4 to 8 projects a year, right? If you have that much production a year, you need to have a system, right? So if you have a guy like this he's not going to have all of that infrastructure, that's when you have all of these issues with these horrible stories. The guy just underbid the project and they just never come back because they don't have any money anymore to continue with the project, right? He just mismanaged the whole operation. He doesn't good relationship with subcontractors. The guys don't come back. There is no loyalty to the general contractor. One of the things that are so important when you're a general contractor is to create loyalty with your clients, with your subcontractors, with your employees, with your collaborators, with suppliers, and everybody. Because all of these people, all of that infrastructure will help you to be able to deliver things on time. So time is so important in this equation. So but you need to culture all of these aspects to be able to deliver a good product, a good service, right? So anyway, I just wanted to show you this so you understand sometimes why some contractors are more costly than others, But you need to think about value, What is the value of having somebody who is actually going to guide me, who's going to be supporting me properly and help me to deliver the results that I want for my investment property, right? So, but anyway, we'll talk more about this situation. Investor, starting investor. I've been there. We all been there. We all start with not knowing anything about real estate, about construction, about all the systems that need to be in place to be successful. But that's the truth for any business, by the way. You always need to be aware of so many situations and specifics to be able to develop your business, your dream, your aspirations. I mean, it's all the stories that we have with all the partners we have here with Michael. It's the same story. Michael's story, everybody's story is the same. We all start struggling at the beginning, not knowing sufficient, but I don't think that we need to continue doing the same struggles over and over and over, Partnerships. We have teams. This forum that Michael had created is amazing, I mean, we didn't have this. I don't think any of the people that we start doing these investment properties had this support that we now have. We have access to real estate people. We have access to very skilled and knowledgeable people who can support all of this group, And I think that talking about going back again to the concept of working together, working as a team, helping each other is much better experience than trying to reinvent the wheel over and over and over, right? And so, we have all of these issues. We don't have enough time. You typically have your full-time job. There's no way you can be a GC or trying to manage a project while you have a full-time job. It's impossible. You have to delegate it to whether you have a GC or another situations that I will propose you later on. But you have to delegate it. You have to have people who engage with you and advise you and guide you with all the different aspects of construction. We are in a tough market right now. This little inventory, there is a lot of competition, and there is so much risk for going over the budget. So things that we need to be aware, and oftentimes, these situations are something that we as a general contractors identify, and then we also get scared about it, right? Engaging with somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience and making decisions and following the directions and the visions of people who don't have enough experience, that's also scary, because you know that it might have a very chance of failure, right? So this is a slide that I wanted to show you what minimal qualifications you really need to look when you are searching for a general contractor. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with LNI. LNI is Labor and Industry Relations. LNI is the maximum authority in the state of Washington that administrates, regulates, and controls and licenses general contractors. Or actually, all kinds of contractors. All the contractors that work in the construction industry. So if you go to online, you can actually type the name of the contractor, and you will have, boom, in a minute or less than a minute, you have all the information about the general contractor. And you can see how long he's been working. If he's in the database, he's in compliance with insurance and bonds and all the minimal requirements that you also need to have from the contractor. Also, the contractor will have, one of the things that the LNI regulates is safety. It's very, the insurance that they have, that you're paying to them to keep safe your employees. But also, they're very strict about the guidelines that you need to follow for everything you do that has to be with safety environments for your employees, your subcontractors. So if you have failed to do that, you will have all the stories, the bad and good stories that you had in your history with LNI. Anyway, that's one way to look at a contractor. That's an important look that you have to take when you start screening a contractor. Therefore, you don't have to really worry too much about checking their license. Just as long as you find them there, you're good. It's important that you look when you interview contractors and then make sure that they are financially stable. The last thing you want to do is to hire somebody that's scrambling and is not going to be capable to sustain their operations because their financials are really questionable. So that's another aspect that I would definitely check. I think that it's very important that you interview the person and ask them all the systems that he has in place, and have a very good description of how he do his business, and how the relationship with subcontractors, how everything that you can ask that describes the way that he operates. I think that is really easy to understand someone that has a system when you talk to them and describe to you the detailed information about their operation. References. Talk to every reference, ask for references. I strongly recommend you to interview several contractors, because in that way, instead of continue listening to all of these myths that, I had this horrible experience with this guy, you don't know, it really takes two to tango, honestly, Obviously, the bad situation will always be after the contractor, because you're talking among investors, right? But the reality is that instead of being relying on all of those stories, make your own story. Interview a bunch of general contractors. Find, before you start searching for properties, identify a guy that will be your contractor. Create a partnership, talk to them, and make sure that you can rely on that person as at least your advisor, your consultant. So anyway, this is the area where I strongly recommend you to find general contractor. The real situation is that the construction part of the business is the real money pit. This is where you're going to lose all your money. It's not the deals, is not how you figure out the acquisition of the property. Is the construction. That's where you're going to lose a lot of money if you don't have a good system in place, if you don't have a good partners, if you don't have a very good idea of what you're doing. So I strongly, continuously stress the idea of partnering with a construction professional. Typical issues that you experience when you fail in a project, you don't have a clear scope. That creates, even if you have a good contractor, if you don't have a clear scope of what you're gonna do, and then you're gonna continue doing changes, that will be change orders. That will be issues that will actually increase the cost of your project. Communication is very important. Communication is important in 360 degrees around our lives. We need to be able to communicate clearly, consistently, and in order to be able to communicate what we want to communicate, it is important to understand what we want. So anyway, those are important things. There is always the stigma from the contractor believes that the investor is very unrealistic or have very unrealistic expectations with a very tight budgets, and eventually the investor believes the contractor is unreliable, and then it just creates. But in reality, is really not about people. It's really all about the lack of creation of systems. If we create a system and we really know step by step exactly what we want, we're going to avoid all of these situations that really it makes a really bad situation for everybody, for the contractors, for the investors, for everybody. I strongly believe that if we summarize this, these five areas of focusing will actually create the foundation to create a good system. You have a pre-planning, you know what you want, you figure what you want. The pre-planning will include the alignment of your team, your contractors, your real estate agents, everybody that you need in a team. Then you healthy and realistically develop a budget, define your scope and commit to that scope, and then develop a relationship between your contractor and your investor. So then you can actually implement all of these elements and have a much better chance of success in your projects. The way that typically cost is designed there are a few ways, but these are the most typical ways. You do the cost plus, which basically is time and materials, plus the markup, whatever markup the constructors have. Typically, an average markup for the contractors is 30%. And then this also, but the problem with that is that while it's much more transparent, the issue is that you are taking the risk, right? Because if this is basically whatever is taken to do whatever we're doing, it's going to be the labor cost plus materials and then my markup. Versus if you do a fixed bid, you basically the contractor commit to a budget that he's saying, that the cost of the installation of the floor is going to be such, and that's going to be the cost. It's not going to change no matter what. So I think that is something that to keep in consideration, but that's also something that once you create a liaison with your contractor, then you can actually be so flexible and figure out something that benefits both of you. So what is important in a partnership is, at least for the investors, we need to be as predictable as possible. We need to have the speed because time is money, and be able to have an ability to control the cost by collaborating with the contractor. And contractor, the more clear idea he has of what he wants to do, he will be more efficient. And that's assuming that you have a good contractor, that you have a screen already, that he has all the minimal qualifications that you want. And then ultimately, with all of this synergy between contractor and real estate agent, then you have an ability to have a recurrency in your operation and have a model that is reproducible. This is kind of a diagram that, it is a diagram that sort of explains the challenges that you have, right? Yeah, I understand that it's so important to have a good contractor with all of these qualifications, but obviously that contractor is going to be more expensive than you get somebody who doesn't have all of this wonderful infrastructure. The thing, though, is that oftentimes, depending on everybody's situation, every investor has a different situation. So an investor might be actually not having a job, don't have to have a job, and he can actually be the GC. And sometimes you don't need a full-scale remodeling. You need just a contractor, a painter, and a carpenter, and then you probably don't need to have all the big deal GC. So every contract, every situation is going to be different, and depending on the situation, you're going to need different type of scenarios and different requirements. Nonetheless, I strongly believe that regardless of the nature of your project, you will be benefit to find somebody that is very knowledgeable, that is very reliable as your consultant. And then you can hire him. There is a bunch of guys, several people who are willing to be consultants. And then you just pay them a fee for the time that consults with you for a particular question that you have. And that's something that you can always go back. And eventually you create a relationship with them, and then you're good. There are many situations that we can consider depending on the circumstances of every investor, where we can have a team of people. And actually, let me tell you in the next slide says this. So basically, we have the possibility of doing multiple permutations of how you can operate with our general contractor. One possibility is, especially with a young, the starting up investor, is you create a group of investors, and then you create, a contractor that you screen, and then you find that it has all the right qualifications. Then you create a partnership, and you sort of share something with them in a way that is going to be your in-house contractor. And then the thing is, this is very complicated in some ways, because if you have, let's say that you're a general contractor, in a high season, it's really hard to justify reducing your markup that you have in a retail environment where any household people will pay you the markup that you're asking for. And it will be hard to justify to compromise your markup to go with an investor who has a super tight budget, and he is going to be asking for the reduction of the markup. The markup, oftentimes, especially in small and medium-sized contractors, the markup include not only the profit for the contractor, it also covers the overhead of the contractor, and also oftentimes covers some costs that sometimes is really difficult to forecast when you are doing the quotation. Like, I'm going to give you an example that is always a struggle for contractors: garbage. You don't know how much garbage that you're going to generate in a contract. Every project is so different. It's so difficult to calculate with precision how much garbage are you going to generate and going to dispose. It costs money to do all of that, to keep a site clean and dispose all the debris. So the markup covers not just profit, but all of this cost. So for a general contractor, it's hard to justify reduce their markup when they can actually get the right markup with everybody else, right? So we have to be creative. We have to figure out how we can establish collaborations that, but if you tell a contractor, okay, well, we're going to put together 4 investors that are going to give you 4 houses a year, and then, well, that's a different story, right? We're talking wholesale versus retail, right? So then, yes, of course, there is a room for compromising with an investor, right? Because then you have much more volume of work, and then you can do all of that. There's a commitment, right? Alternatively, another possibilities that I thought could work, especially for people who have full-time jobs and doing investment, is that just have a person that is going to be your project manager. Hire a project manager. Obviously, somebody who has enough experience. He's going to be. Then you are part of a recruiting system for the subcontractors. And just like everything else, you want to create a commitment with your subcontractors. Your project manager is going to manage in the whole operation. And that's another way to save money, because ultimately you still need to participate, but you're delegating things in a way that in some ways will help you to save money. So there are several permutations depending on what type of work are you doing, but ultimately the bottom line here is we need to create collaborations with virtually everybody that we're working in this process, but in this case, with contractors. And then you have to have an array of different contractors. Challenging part with the specialty contractors like electricians, plumbers, HVAC, those are really difficult contractors, primarily because, unfortunately, I'm not sure if in the entire country, but at least in Seattle, there is not a recycling of trades. So nobody's actually going back to trades, everybody. So that's why, you see a significant amount of immigrants coming to take on the construction trades, because there's nobody doing it, right? And there is no new generations preparing to do the trades. But in particularly, the challenging part is with electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. For that, you really need to have a minimal level of education to be trained to be an electrician. You have to have some understanding of math. You have to have very good written skills in English and speaking in English, and a lot of education that oftentimes the immigrants don't have. So that's why you don't see a lot of the immigrants working as plumbers or electricians or HVAC constructors. So therefore, there is a very shortage of contractors on those fields. And that's why they are so expensive, right? And that's why they don't care. I mean, they have so many people looking for them that they don't care if, they're not going to compromise the prices with us, because, there are people who pay even more than the right price, right? But it comes all again from the perspective of loyalty and recurrency. Oftentimes, I mean, some of the electricians and plumbers that I have, 60% of their project flow comes from me. So yeah, of course, they're going to be loyal to me because I'm giving them a lot of work, right? And that's true for everything else. If you commit with them and then we figure out a way to continuously feed these people, they're going to be loyal to you. They're going to work with you. But there has to be a commitment. You cannot expect that an electrician or a plumber or any of these contractors will come to you when you call them, when you need them, if you just call them every year. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have 300 projects going on anyway. So commitment, loyalty are important values to develop these synergies with contractors, right? So this is a very interesting case study. Michael Haas, I know Michael for several years actually. And, ever since I met Michael, and I'm not sure what was the level of his experience in investment, but I knew he was an investor. I remodeled a few projects of him as investment properties, and his house actually too. And we have an incredible amount of different collaborations. He and I, he has helped me to acquire properties. He has sold properties for me. I've been in this meeting since the beginning of the story. And so I think that it's so important and so valuable when you commit and engage and create these collaborations, because they last forever, and then it creates another array of opportunities to continue develop. And so I'm very grateful to that, I mean, I really look up on Michael. He's done an incredible amount of very original work and very sustainable work. So it's been really a pleasure working and becoming a friend of him. He's my friend. I like him. I'm really happy to see him every time I see him. And every time I need some help with a question, I have to do this or I have to do, he always takes my calls. And so that's the kind of collaborations you want with everybody that you engage, especially in this business, right? So anyway, oops, something happened to my, Anyway, that's it about the presentation. I want to tell you a little bit about my company. I've been striving to develop trust. I think that trust in any business, in anything you do, in any relationship is so important to create sustainability. Communication is one of my strongest tools that I think that allow me to go very far, because clear communication, consistent communication is so important to make every project flow correctly. And as a result of that, I feel that I am a reliable person. People see me as a reliable collaborator, and I'm very grateful for developing all of these situations to create an organization that is full of very skilled people, very committed workers, talented, and I just basically recognize that we're a team. Everybody needs each other in this team, and everybody supports each other to succeed. Everybody gets jobs, everybody is happy, and everybody has the rewards of the satisfaction of every client that we service. And we, always are focused in service. I think service is an important aspect of our organization. We recognize that, honestly, it's a pleasure to serve the people, the community, and create all of these synergies. I end up being friends with all my clients, and and they also pay me. So that's pretty cool, right? And so I want to end up this presentation with 2 call action items. If you are planning a project, find an optimal contractor, develop a partnership, develop a system, and create recurrency. Okay? And if you are serious about scaling, let's build a system. Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions you might have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. So when you're comparing bids between construction or GCs, is it advisable to develop your own personal template, send it to them, so they all come back looking the same? Because I find it hard comparing apples and oranges of the formats of what they send for their bid, and sometimes they're not bidding out the same thing on the same project.
One of the strategies that I use as a contractor, so then, because I know that I'm going to be compared to someone else, right? So what I do is I actually invest, and I'm very thorough with my clients to break everything line by line, right? So then when they compare me, it's a benefit to me, right? Because I know that I have a very competitive prices. But that way, I would suggest, I don't suggest it, but because I broke everything down in pieces, then it's so easy to have the other contractors say, by the way, could you quote me this, right? So if you were gonna do that, I strongly recommend you to break everything in pieces, because that way, like you're saying, you're gonna be able to compare apples with apples. So that's my recommendation, yeah. If you can do it, it would be great. Otherwise, I don't think, oftentimes, I'm very risk. I'm a high risk taker, right? So I know that it's possible I'm not gonna get the job, but I put that extra effort to break everything down in pieces, so they really understand, what are they paying for, and they'll also be able to compare to others. But anyway, that's my recommendation. Break it down in pieces for every project you do, and that way you can compare with other contractors. Yes, sir.
Question for you, Luis. Let's say you're walking through a project with an investor and they're kind of pointing out everything they want done. Maybe there's a statement of work, maybe there isn't, maybe there's a sketch, maybe there isn't. I think for a lot of us investors, we part ways and then we just start texting our contractor, hey, do you have the bid yet? Hey, do you have the bid yet? Could you share a little bit about what happens on the back end after you walk a project with an investor, the work that you need to do to actually come up with a number for what they're trying to do, and then also how investors can make that job a little easier.
Of course. So one of the perks that I felt was very valuable to me when I transferred from biotech to construction was that when I was an analytical scientist, so I needed to do a lot of analysis, mining data and things like that, and using statistical analysis. And so I transferred that skill set into my operation because ultimately it's all about analyzing data. And I had a lot of data for a lot of bathrooms that I done, a lot of kitchens that I done. So, and then at some point you can actually create a model, right? Predictable model. And so what I do is oftentimes I've been optimizing these processes, not quite to the way I want, but basically I'm using this historical data to come up with, an algorithm that allows me to have a reasonable average, of every item, right? So like, for instance, let's say that I recently walked in the house that Asim was about to buy. And what I do is I take pictures, right? Because that allows me to remember. I have a pretty good memory, by the way, but I take pictures so that when I go, I plug everything into my spreadsheet, right? And to my model. And then basically what happened is that I start calculating the cost of, let's say we have a bathroom and there are certain conditions in the bathroom, that I need to add, sizes. I put the size of the bathroom and then that just uses an average of sizes of that bathrooms, with an average, and then I also have a prompt that says what kind of finishes, and depending on the client, I do kind of this is kind of most likely the finish that this guy is going to use, and then I end up with a number, right? And basically it's a high level, right? A high level number, but it's pretty accurate. I would say it is in between 85% to 90% accurate. And basically, that's what I send to everybody in this phase, right? Because it's very preliminary, particularly for investors, right? It would not make any sense to invest so much time because it takes a lot of time to do a very precise budget proposal, right? But for investors, that we need something quick, and you really don't need that level of precision anyway. You just need 80% is good enough. So that's what I do.
Question. You mentioned that it's very important to define the scope at the beginning of the project. But I guess now that homeowners have the opportunity to build DADUs, a lot of them don't necessarily know what they want to build. So they come to you without their scope and they say, I want to maximize what my backyard has to offer. How does this change the relationship? The scope is kind of unknown and it's delegated.
Well, the reality of the story is to do anything like a DADU, that will trigger a full review project, right? And even if it's a STFI. But the thing is, if you're gonna do a DADU, you want your contractor to be supportive of something that you develop with your architect. Because your architect is gonna be your first point of contact, right? You're gonna talk to your architect, you're gonna tell what you wanna do, and then you create a preliminary vision of it, You check with your contractor and it says, okay, what do you think about the construction part of it, Because that's going to be kind of a dance, right? And they're going to say, oh, no, you're going to have to deal with all of this. The foundation is going to be in the rear. It's a wet zone. You have to put pin pads and da-da-da. So this is a little bit of a dance, right? And then you go back to your architect and until you figure out something. That is part of the due diligence that you have to do until you develop your actual clear vision of it, right? But you start initially with your architect, right? And then you bounce back, and then you bounce back. And eventually you come with a solid understanding of whatever you want to do. And that's what it is,
So it's still the same way?
It's still the same way. The only aspect that I was very recommending in the presentation is that don't develop a full-scale vision just with your architect. Because the architect is in the computer just looking at things, and You want a construction guy that comes to you and says, okay, look, I developed this preliminary conceptual vision of what I want. Let's see what's the viability and feasibility of this. Then you go with your construction guy, and then you look at all the aspects that the architect is not looking at. And that's how you start dancing until you come up with a solid vision of what you want to do.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
I have two questions.
Yes.
Thank you. And my second question was regarding the interview of the contractor. So here it's much easier. As the investor as well, you have a meeting, everything, you can go on the job site and everything. I don't know if you will be different for that, but if we want to invest out of state, do you have any recommendation regarding interview contractor, what to pay attention for? What is sounds reasonable regarding payment schedule out of state, not 50% of course, but what do you recommend when you interview?
I will still use the same recommendations that I give you to interview a person anywhere in the United States. I was pointing it to LNI because at least here in the state of Washington, which I don't think is true for every single state in the United States, you can just get online and then you get all the history of this contractor, right? But even if you don't have anything equivalent like that outside or in other states or cities, I will still, you can collect a lot of information when you talk to someone, especially if you had the opportunity to talk to the person in person, right? References, explain me your system, how do you manage a project, talk to your clients, those are very basic things that are very helpful to figure out the profile of someone. And then also, as far as the payments, I'm going to tell you how I do it typically. What I do, which I think it becomes fair, is let's say that I had a $250,000 project, right? And then I calculate that this project is going to be completed in 3 months, right? So what I do is I divide. I need to have cash flow, and I explain that to the clients, right? I need cash flow for materials. I need cash flow for paying the people, the subcontractors, and everybody, right? And then also what I do is I don't pay like the subcontractors. I don't pay everything until we have a complete inspection of whatever they did, right? So I give them a little bit of money at the beginning, and another installment once they are about to complete it, and then I give them the final payment until. So that also allows me to have cash flow, right? So what I do, I subdivide. I have an initial payment, and the rest I subdivided in every 2 weeks installments for the next 3 months, right? So that way, it's fair for the client because the client is seeing the progress. And if you don't finish what you said you're going to finish based on the schedule, I'm going to have to hold your payment, right? Which is fair, right? And there are so many reasons why it needs to happen too. But the good thing is if they hold the payment, which I think is fair, everything stops. So that I don't have to keep paying anybody, until that stop is released, and then you continue, right? So, and that's how I do it. I never do like, give me half or no. It's just progressive payments, as you are progressing also with the construction. And that was also a safety net for the client as well, Yes.
Follow-up question.
Yes.
Follow-up question. You mentioned that in your slides, the scheduling, when interviewing contractors, as investors, you do that and want to find a contractor. Maybe I don't know if you use yourself, General Contractors, maybe not at this point, but what you would suggest to actually ask people what their scheduling system and what would be exact schedule or approximate schedule for a project in hand. That's up here. And also
correct. I do actually attach in
payment
the schedule,
right?
the payment schedule too, right, which is aligned to the completion of certain items, as well. But what I do when I interview and ask them about the schedule, so the thing with the schedule is you have to be, like for instance, let's say electricians and plumbers, they don't like to work together. And they typically, but the electricians are much faster than plumbers because the scope of work of the electricians typically it's less engaging as the plumbers, right? And so typically what we do is we set up, like say for instance, we have, let's say a project that you think is going to take about 3 days for the installation of plumbing. I'll give it 1 week, right? Because that way also they also have the weekends, right? Aside from the additional 2 days. So then they have the whole week to finish that, and then you have, and then there is a bit of overlap, but then you do the electrical work after that, the following week. So you're giving a little bit of a buffer, excuse me, and then the last guy that enters is the HVAC person, right? Because the HVAC will work around the holes. The bigger holes that are done in the framing are by the plumbers, right? You have the bends, the 2-pipe bends and all of this. And so it's much easier for the electricians to work around those things and for the HVAC people than the other way around, right? And so you are creating a schedule based on these considerations and obviously based on the story and the experience that you had in other projects before. And so I would put, like, say, for instance, halfway through the week where the electrician is working, I put the inspection for the plumber, right? And then I do kind of the same situation when the HVACs usually are really fast. They're 2 to 3 days max. And then, and I do the same for the inspection for the electrical. And so what I would suggest, and I would actually learn a lot when somebody tells me a story, and I said, ask the contractor, tell me, how do you develop your schedule? Tell me. Give me an example of how you develop and what the considerations are taking to prevent, a very tight schedule that is not going to be realistic, Ask them, and they will tell you. And you will listen. I mean, with somebody who knows what's going on, or who really know their systems, it will be so convincing that you will believe. And then talk to your to his previous clients. What is the experience? Did they finish on time? How much was the delay from the schedule? That's a really good point of reference,
The other question you said, it's very important to check financial standing, and I agree completely from our experiences, some projects we had, and how damaging it could be if they ran out of money for whatever reason. Maybe they took too many projects, or not got paid yet, significant amount, part of that. That's the problem, apparently, for me as a client. They can pay to the
pay Pablo from Pedro from Pablo. Yeah, I know.
So that's probably something that most contractors would even be offended if asked, like, how's your financial standing? I can't probably ask them.
Well, there are nice ways to ask questions, One way to do it kind of indirectly to find out is, and which is a valid concern too, is I am very interested in making sure that my project is going to be on time. How many projects do you handle a year? How many projects do you have right now? And he will tell you, and that is a good source of balance. But another thing that I will do, to reassure everything, is can I have a tour of or a couple of your projects? Can I see what you are doing? That's a really good, important reference point, because then you mind if I talk to the owner of this project? Now you can see how things been going, I mean,
Promised versus where they had scheduled.
correct. You answer a lot of questions when you talk to a couple of those guys right there, because it's right there, it's happening right now, So that's a way to do it without asking, you have money in the bank? Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you guys. And we're here with Michael. Anything like, I'm gonna leave my business cards. If you need any further helps, don't hesitate to call me.